Dr. Duncan and his collaborators. Dr. Duncan is dead. And when you talk about Jamaica's political history, D.K. Duncan's name cannot be left out, you know. But that's for another story. Dr. Duncan and his collaborators. Mr. Perkins opened that article with one of the most devastating political assessments you are likely to find in Jamaican journalism. He wrote of Micheal Manley, that's Mr. Perkins, quote, Mr. Micheal Manley is the kind of man that ought never to have been entrusted with political power in a democratic society. That was in 1977. Perkins devastating with his pen. A devastating piece of journalism that is unmatched, unrivaled today. Mr. Micheal Manley, said Mutty Perkins, is the kind of man that ought never to have been entrusted with political power in a democratic society. That is not criticism. That is an indictment. But I don't want you to focus on the insult. I want you to focus on the question underneath it. Because Perkins was asking, what exactly does Micheal Manley stand for? And why was that question so important to Mr. Perkins? Because Mr. Perkins believed that Manley's political philosophy had developed in stages. That when Manley came with democratic socialism in 1974, Perkins believed that Manley, and Perkins produced the evidence to show that Manley had always wanted to do it. And you know, I want you to follow me to the end, because I wonder if Mr. Golding has always wanted to do this. In 1972, you see, the politics of participation was what Manley was about. Then came the language of fundamental change. Then came the restructuring of society. Then came the embrace of socialism. Then came the phrase democratic socialism. That word democratic socialism did not emerge just like that, you know. Stay with me. Because Perkins' argument was that this wasn't simply a political changing of Micheal Manley's mind. Perkins believed it was an ideological project developing behind the scenes. And the evidence Mr. Perkins used was a document attributed to D.K. Duncan describing the PNP's political education process. Mr. Perkins interpreted the material that he received from an insider, that the PNP was preparing its membership for a socialist transformation before that philosophy was fully presented to the Jamaican public. What is happening today is the same PNP, and we need to be careful. And then Perkins asks a question that I think is worth asking again today. I think it's worth asking today. Who is there that still thinks he knows what Micheal Manley stands for? Is there anyone in the audience that know what Manley stands for? Table Talk Live, good afternoon. Do we know what Mr. Manley stands for? Do we know what Mr. Golding stands for? Is there something the PNP is hiding from us? And this is where I want to move beyond party politics. Because underneath the argument between Micheal Manley and Perkins was a much deeper philosophical disagreement. It was a disagreement about the human being, about government, about wealth, and about what we think the state is supposed to do. Because the socialist instinct says, look at society, look at inequality, look at people who have been left behind, and ask, what can government do to correct the imbalance? That is the socialist viewpoint. And Mr. Perkins' instincts asks a different question. He says, look at society. Look at poverty. Look at unemployment. Look at inequality and ask, listen carefully, what conditions have prevented people from producing, investing, working, and creating wealth? You always hear Perkins with this statement. How men organize to produce the means of their subsistence constitutes the fundamentals of society. That's the capitalist ideology. You know, you have democratic socialism versus liberalism. That's a fascinating debate, you know. That is a fundamentally different starting point, because one begins with distribution and the other begins with production. And so here is the provocative question. What if Jamaica has spent decades arguing about how to divide the pie without having a sufficiently serious conversation how to make the pie bigger? That was one of Mr. Perkins' central concerns. And that is the problem with the People's National Party's ideology. There is no talk about how is it that we are going to make the pie bigger. What we are arguing about is how are we going to divide the pie more equitably among the Jamaican people. You know, Mr. Perkins wrote in 1978